While on his way to Toronto to film the second season of Gen V in March of 2024, actor Chance Perdomo tragically died in a single-vehicle motorcycle crash at just 27 years old. Authorities confirmed no other vehicles were involved, but never released the exact location, cause of the crash, weather condition, or road details, leaving the true circumstances unknown. Because he died alone, there were no public witnesses and no full incident report, sparking endless speculation among fans. Eerily, just days before the accident, he posted a photo of his motorcycle on Instagram with the ominous caption, "The final calm before the storm." His death impacted Gen V so heavily that production was postponed, and instead of recasting his character, the writers rewrote the entire season around his absence, a rare move that shows just how important and irreplaceable he was as an actor. In 1996, a stray mother cat in New York City became famous for performing one of the most heroic acts in animal rescue history. When the abandoned garage she and her newborn kittens were living in caught fire, she ran through the flames 5 separate times, carrying each kitten out one by one. By the time she saved the last one, her eyes were blistered shut, her ears and paws were burned, and her fur was scorched. But she touched each kitten with her nose to make sure they were all alive before collapsing unconscious. Nicknamed Scarlet, she later recovered at a veterinary hospital and was reunited with her kittens, all of whom survived. The story went viral worldwide, and the mother cat and all 5 of her babies were eventually adopted into loving homes. A shocking medical scandal is unfolding in Austria, where a neurosurgeon is facing criminal charges for allegedly letting her 12-year-old daughter drill a hole into a patient's skull during emergency brain surgery. The unconscious patient had suffered traumatic head injuries and needed a burr hole to relieve pressure, yet prosecutors say the surgeon handed the drill to her daughter and let her perform the procedure herself, despite the child having zero medical training. The girl never should have been inside the operating room in the first place, as strict hospital protocol forbids minors or unauthorized personnel from being present during sterile surgeries, let alone touching the equipment, let alone drilling into patients' skulls. The patient was never informed a child would be involved, and only discovered the truth months later after an anonymous tip led to an investigation. The hospital immediately fired the surgeons involved, and the lead doctor is now on trial for causing bodily harm and abusing her position. Although the patient survived, he reportedly still suffers long-term effects, and the court called the doctor's decision a catastrophic breach of trust and professionalism. In Dante's Inferno, hell is divided into 9 circles, each one reserved for a specific sin. Today we take a tour of these 9 circles with real-life stories to match. Mika Hargrave died while cheating on her husband with her car mechanic. They were getting it on inside of a closed garage while the car was still running and eventually passed out from carbon monoxide. Their unclothed bodies were later found by Tamika's husband. In 2004, Gail Laverne Grimes died in the hospital after doctors spent 6 exhausting hours trying to separate her skin from a couch. The 500-pound woman had been sitting on her living room sofa for 6 years to the point where her skin had completely fused to the fabric. Rescue workers had to transport Gail and her couch using a trailer, and she ended up dying while still attached to it. Known as the Witch of Wall Street, Hetty Green was once the richest woman in America. But she became infamous for her overly obsessive frugality. She refused to pay for heat, medical care, or clean clothes. Her son's leg once had to be amputated because she delayed treatment while searching for a free clinic. Hetty eventually died from a stroke while arguing over the cost of skim milk. In 1982, South Korean police officer Woo Bum Khan went on one of the deadliest killing rampages in world history. After his girlfriend woke him up by swatting a fly that was on his chest, he armed himself with rifles, grenades, and a service revolver, then spent the entire night moving from village to village, posing as a cop while massacring civilians in their homes. He cut phone lines, lobbed grenades into houses, and shot entire families in their sleep. By dawn, 56 people were dead and dozens more were injured. As police closed in, he ended the fury by taking his own life. Jim Jones began as a fiery Christian preacher with a passion for social justice. But behind the scenes, he rejected the Bible, called himself the reincarnation of Jesus, Buddha, and Lenin, and claimed true salvation could only be achieved through him. In 1978, he led over 900 followers, including 300 children, to a remote jungle in Guyana where they were forced to take their own lives. Their bodies were found piled in rows with their faces blue and arms entwined, proof of what happens when a heretic convinces others that he's a god. Serial killer Richard Ramirez quite literally made violence his religion. Breaking into homes at random, he often restrained entire families and carried out horrifying acts in front of them, designed to mentally and physically destroy his victims in their final moments. In multiple cases, he forced his victims to swear allegiance to the devil before killing them, and left pentagrams drawn across walls and even carved into his victim's skin. In one case, the sadistic killer gouged out a woman's eyes while she was still breathing. His crimes weren't just brutal, they were ritualistic expressions of chaos, cruelty, and complete devotion to evil. For nearly 18 years, Frenchman Jean-Claude Roman pretended to be a successful doctor with the WHO despite never graduating from medical school. He lived off of money from family and friends, claiming he was investing it into elite hedge funds. But in 1993, as his elaborate web of lies began to unravel, Roman chose mass murder over being exposed. He bludgeoned his wife to death with a rolling pin, shot his 2 children in the head, then calmly joined his parents for lunch before killing them and their dog. Roman was arrested and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Carlos Haffy Rodriguez was ejected through a windshield in a drug-fueled crash as a teenager, smashing his skull so badly that surgeons had to remove the entire upper half of it, leaving his brain covered only by skin. Incredibly, he survived without any severe cognitive damage, but went on to rack up arrests for drugs, arson, and other crimes, his caved-in head becoming one of the internet's most infamous mugshots. Here's a photo of tobacco company CEOs declaring under oath that nicotine is not addictive. The moment became infamous when internal documents later revealed that tobacco executives had known for decades about nicotine's highly addictive properties and had even manipulated nicotine levels in cigarettes to enhance dependency. In 18th century Europe, the wealthy often devoured sugar with no real dental care, rotting their teeth into black stumps that often fell out. To keep up appearances, they wore dentures, not wooden as legend claims, but often filled with real human teeth. These were bought from the poor, pulled from slaves or prisoners, or scavenged from battlefields, sometimes still bloody from fallen soldiers. With no concept of sterilization, they could carry infections, even syphilis, into the wearer's mouth. In advanced cases, the disease could slowly eat away at the face, collapsing the nose and leaving a grotesque hollow mask where features used to be. In 2009, 25-year-old Matrice Richardson was arrested by Malibu police after failing to pay a dinner bill, then released just after midnight without her phone, wallet, or car. She then wandered into the mountains alone, reportedly in a state of mental distress. 11 months later, her skeletal remains were found in a canyon, her body bizarrely mummified in some areas but missing internal organs, and her clothes were scattered far from her body. Authorities insisted there was no foul play, but the condition of her remains and the decision to release her into the night remained deeply controversial. Rising French child actor and voice dubber Boris Roata was best known as the French voice of Kevin McAllister in Home Alone. But in August of 1994, at just 14 years old, he was struck by a car while cycling in the French Alps and killed instantly, cutting short a promising career that had only just begun. In 1901, outlaw Thomas Blackjack Ketchum was hanged in Clayton, New Mexico, the town's first ever execution. But with no prior experience, they miscalculated the rope length. When the trapdoor dropped, the force was so strong that it ripped his head clean off. His headless body dropped to the ground, and locals, rather unfazed, posed for postcards with the corpse, later turning the images into macabre souvenir postcards. 1990, rock and roll pioneer Chuck Berry bought a restaurant in Missouri that didn't go very well for him. Shortly after opening, he was sued by several women who claimed he installed a video camera in the ladies' bathroom. Berry opted for a class action settlement with 59 women that cost him over $1.2 million. He claimed he set up the camera to catch a worker he suspected was stealing from his restaurant. But when police raided his home, they found several videotapes of women using the bathroom, and at least one of them was a minor. Julie Andrews had one of the most iconic voices in Hollywood history, but one botched surgery destroyed it forever. Known for Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, her flawless 4-octane soprano was considered untouchable. But in 1997, a simple procedure to remove harmless nodules went horribly wrong. Surgeons permanently mutilated her vocal cords, leaving her in agonizing pain just to speak. Andrews later sued the hospital and won, but no lawsuit could undo the damage, as the world's most beloved singing voice was silenced forever. This NASA scientist helped land humans on the moon, but his rockets were first built with slave labor in Nazi death camps. Wernher von Braun, the celebrated architect of the Apollo missions, once ran the V-2 rocket program for Adolf Hitler. The rockets were manufactured using prisoners from the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp, who were typically starved starved, beaten, and worked until they died. Conditions were so brutal that over 20,000 prisoners were killed while making the rockets, far more than the rockets ever killed in combat. But after the war, Von Braun wasn't punished. Instead, the US secretly brought him to America under Operation Paperclip, erased most of his Nazi past, and turned him into a national hero.